All right, in this lesson we're going to go over three main areas or assurances services that accountants can provide about information from one party to another. Now, the one thing about these three services is that they kind of overlap in that we go from broad to very specific. And so if you see from my illustration here, we've got broad. So we've got something called assurances, okay? And those are services that accountants provide to their clients, assurance services. But within assurance is attest services. Attest is a little bit more narrow. And then very specific is auditing. So we can often say that auditing is an assurance services, but an assurance services is not always an auditing service. So if someone's going to provide you assurance services, it could mean auditing, but it could also mean an attest service, or it could mean something different. So let's go through the definitions of each one of them. Let's start with the biggest and the broadest, and that's assurance. Assurance is an independent professional services that improves the quality of information or its context for his decision makers. And so with assurance services, it really is the attest and auditing, and that's the big ones, but it's the main goal of an assurance service is to provide better information to the users of that information, and that may be in the form of a report that's issued by the independent accountant, or it could be in the form of gathering good information so that the users of that information can have a better information to make decisions based on the information provided by the independent auditor. Independent professional, because not all professionals have to be auditors. So independent professional services that improves the quality, and that's the main thing. It improves the quality of the information being provided to the user of that information, okay? And so that's what assurances are. So very big, very broad, but it also includes the attest function and the auditing function that we're going to see in a minute. So let's move on to the attest function. The attest function is a professional service in which a professional is engaged to issue a report on a subject matter or an assertion about a subject matter that is the responsibility of another party. And so an example of an attest would be, let's say we want to take one of the many assertions that are in an audit and issue a report on just that assertion. Okay, so maybe it's internal control. So when we're testing internal control, that's not an audit of internal control. That is an attest of internal control, whether or not it's working properly under the specifications or guidelines of a third party. Okay, and so that's what a test is. So we're not actually auditing everything. We're just checking this one little thing to see if they meet the standards given to us by a third party or some other agency or organization. And then the very narrowest part, the very specific service that auditors provide is something called auditing. And this is, we've already discussed this in a previous lesson, but systematic process of objectively obtaining and evaluates management's assertions relating to the economic position and the financial statement. That's a very, very specific definition there. But what we're trying to say with audits is we're trying to evaluate the financial statements as a whole and all of the management assertions that go into the financial statements in order to come out with an opinion that can be used to solidify those financial statements as fairly accurate in the eyes of the auditor. Okay? So again, three kind of worlds of things when we talk about assurance services that we provide based on information that is given to us and based on maybe a third party's observation of what we're supposed to be looking for in order to give our opinions on. Okay, so we've got assurances, attest, and auditing. An audit is always an assurance services, but an assurance services that we provide is not always an auditing. And an attest service that we provide is always an assurance, but it's not always an auditing. Okay? And so that's what we're trying to get here in this lesson. We're just trying to give you a big overview of the attest function, the assurance functions, and the audit functions. And sometimes they are used interchangeably in conversations, but at the end of the day, they all really mean something just a little bit different in what we're trying to provide to that end user.